This episode may contain content of a graphic nature, including descriptions of physical and sexual violence against adults, children, and animals. Listener discretion is advised. Hi everyone, I'm Talia.
And I'm Tanya.
And together we are Crimes and Consequences, a true crime podcast. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Talia.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's episode of Crimes and Consequences. We are going to do a very popular one today that I know very little about, or I knew very little about, and was always very curious. This is about Robert Allen Durst.
Yes, the
Yes.
Jinx.
Is that what they call? Oh, there was them.
That HBO.
I didn't watch it.
Yes, I did.
I should have. A little background. He was born April 12th, 1943 in Scarsdale, New York, to Seymour and Bernice. He was the oldest of four. He had two younger brothers, Douglas and Thomas, and one little sister, Wendy. Robert and his siblings were born into a very powerful and wealthy family, one whose name carried weight along with it in New York City. Robert's grandfather, Joseph Durst, he built a prominent billion-dollar real estate company.
Damn.
I know, it's a lot of money.
It is.
Which was turned into an empire. All of his wealth started with his very first building purchase, which was back in 1912. Then the Durst family's name became notorious. Today, the company is one of the city's largest family-run real estate organizations, and it's Robert's brother, Douglas. He's the one that is at the helm of it. One night, when Robert was 7 years old, his mother either walked off or fell off the side of the roof of their mansion, killing herself.
Oh, man.
Robert claimed that his father had brought him to the window and that he witnessed her death, which is kind of strange.
Yeah.
But his brother Douglas is like, no.
That didn't happen?
That didn't happen. At the time of her death, when it occurred, the newspapers had said Bernice had fallen off the roof after overdosing on asthma medication. However, some family members, including Robert, claimed it was suicide. I don't know exactly why she was on the roof.
Yeah, me either.
I'm not usually on my roof.
Have you ever been on the roof of your house?
Nope.
Me either.
Regardless of which one is actually true, her death really affected Robert. I mean, he struggled with mental health afterwards. When he was 10 years old, he was assessed by a psychiatrist who claimed he couldn't be treated because he had personality decomposition and possibly schizophrenia.
Oh, no. He couldn't be treated?
No, not really.
I guess you don't treat those disorders. What's mental decomposition?
I don't know. It doesn't sound like something I want.
No.
Maybe I have it. I don't even know now.
Maybe. I don't know.
He attended Scarsdale High School, so he's still functional. You know, he's still going to school, and he was described as a loner. He then went on to Pennsylvania's Lehigh University, so I don't know how bad he could be if he's in college.
Yeah.
He ended up graduating in 1965 with a bachelor's degree in economics.
Oh, that's hard stuff.
Well, then he enrolled in a doctoral program
Really?
at UCLA.
I mean, that's some difficult subjects.
Especially if you have personality decomposition and schizophrenia. That is where he met and became very close friends with an aspiring writer and the daughter of a mobster, Susan Berman. The two were thick as thieves, but I'll get back to that later. In 1969, he withdrew from the doctoral program and he moved back to New York City, but he was only there for a little bit. At some point in the early 1970s, he ended up moving to Vermont and opening a health food store called All Good Things.
Oh.
I have a sense that he traveled a lot back and forth between the two states. In the fall of 1971, he met 18-year-old Kathleen, she went by Kathie, McCormick. She was a dental hygienist who lived in one of the buildings owned by the Durst family, or organization if you want to call it. They met when Robert stopped by to pick up rent.
Oh.
Hey.
Hey. Nice to meet you.
Kathie had just moved to New York City from Long Island. She was bright, charming, it's just the kind of person everybody liked. And the two immediately hit it off. Kathie didn't seem to mind his cool affection. As a matter of fact, she thought of him more as a sweet, sensitive guy. The two were smitten with each other just after 2 dates, and that's when Robert asked Kathie to move into his Vermont home near his health food store. It wasn't until January of 1972 that she took him up on the offer and moved in with him. They were undoubtedly in love, but they had some issues. He's got a couple issues. For one thing, he was 10 years older than her. Secondly, they came from two completely different worlds. He came from a life of wealth and power, and Kathie came from a modest Irish Catholic household. It was easy for her to quickly become swept up in the lifestyle that came along with being a Durst, but they still had their differences. After being pressured from his father to move back to New York City and work for the Durst organization, Robert eventually gave in. Just 1 year after the couple had moved in together, Robert ended up closing his health food store and moving back to the city. Both of them did, actually. On Robert's 30th birthday, Robert and Kathie got married.
Aww.
While the marriage had started out as a loving one, things suddenly changed after moving from Vermont to New York City. It was a big change, and it was not a good change. Kathie had said that Robert's father, Seymour, brought out the worst in Robert, and that he turned him into a completely different person from the man she fell in love with in Vermont. At first, Robert loved nothing more than show Kathie off, because she's just beautiful, and he would take her to the best and biggest events in New York. He loved showing her this world that he knew and grew up in. Even Seymour approved of his new daughter-in-law. However, as time went on, Robert, who wasn't really, as I said, that warm before, he had a cool affection, he got even colder. For a long time, Kathie kept how miserable she was a secret. However, there were hints dropped that alluded to Robert having anger problems. What at first started out as yelling turned into pretending to hit her.
What?
Yeah, what the fuck is that?
Yeah, what the fuck is that?
And then, much worse, as time went on, it went downhill. Kathie's brother, Jim, said he first witnessed Robert abusing Kathie at a family Christmas party.
Are you kidding
when he
me?
grabbed her by the hair.
Oh my God.
Who does it at a family Christmas
I know,
party?
Right?
Fuck.
Jeez, he don't give one shit who sees.
Right. Kathie had kept numerous diaries filled with details about how she'd been suffering in the marriage. For one, believe it or not, Robert was a cheapskate.
Oh, jeez.
He was one of those guys, a ton of money, but cheap as hell. Even though she was married to a millionaire, she was going to medical school. She wanted to have a career and have her own money to do with as she pleased.
He's probably up her ass all the time, right? Just about her spending.
Then one day, Robert dropped this bomb on her. He told her, I didn't want any children. And that was upsetting for her. So she just tried to focus on school. But saying that really fractured their relationship. And after that, it never got repaired. Robert would tell her that he might be open to considering adopting, which gave Kathie just a little bit of hope. But he squashed that every time she set up any appointment with any agency. He wouldn't go. He'd just make up excuses. In 1976, Kathie ended up getting pregnant, and Robert was pissed. He accused her of doing it on purpose, and he forced her to get an abortion.
Aww.
And he told her that he would divorce her if she didn't. She was really reluctant to do that because she really wanted to have a baby. But she went through with it.
Aww.
And then she ended up suffering from depression as a result. To make matters worse, it was also around the same time when she first found out that Robert was having an affair.
I fucking knew it. I knew it.
Having an affair.
What a fucker.
You know how she found out?
How?
She found Polaroid pictures in their medicine cabinet and closets.
What?
Yeah.
A medicine cabinet?
Right? Like,
Like, don't...
You're not even hiding it.
Right. Like, at least hide this shit. God, be discreet, man. God. How insulting.
She asked him about the photos, and Robert revealed that he'd had a woman in their home.
Oh, man.
And
that's when shit would go nuclear at my house, right?
Not only did he have a woman in their home, but he had moved things around their home to make it look like he was a single man living there. Like, get rid of the photos, anything of hers. He just outright told her this, and it's just weird.
Just didn't give a care.
No, this was something that no relationship can really survive. There was no love left between the two of them. And Kathie, she was just basically suffering. In early 1982, she was only 29. Aww. Kathie was treated for facial bruises at the Bronx hospital. She told a friend that Robert had beaten her up when she confronted him about another affair. She knew he'd taken up with a woman named Prudence Farrow, and that is the same Prudence that the Beatles sang about in their song Dear Prudence.
Oh, it was the same woman.
And happens to be Mia
Farrow's sister.
Yes.
Wow.
So medical school alone is stressful. It was her final year, and it was pretty difficult. Yeah. And then she's daily being abused and emotionally abused. It was too much for 29-year-old Kathie. As a result, she began drinking excessively and using drugs to cope with the abuse. She barely slept or ate. Her friends couldn't help but notice this once bubbly, bright person was just like a shell of her former self. She was detached, constantly afraid and nervous. Kathie wanted a divorce and began telling friends that she's going to leave Robert. As soon as she finished medical school, she was going to file. Robert caught wind of this, and he reacted by canceling all of her credit cards and removing her from the joint bank account. And he wouldn't pay for her last semester of medical school.
What a fuckhead.
Yeah. That's when she just demanded a divorce, and she was only asking for a $250,000 settlement, which, considering he's an heir to a billionaire, I mean, Kathie told her friends.
They were probably married almost like 10 years at this point, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, $250,000's not that much.
Kathie told friends that she had proof that Robert had been embezzling money from his father.
Oh, no.
And had made fraudulent claims on his tax returns as well as her own. And she had let Robert know that she knew that.
Oh, shit, girl.
One time when she was at her New York City apartment with two friends, Phil Stevenson and George Kearns, those were the friends. Phil said that Robert showed up at the door, threw a wad of cash at Kathie's face and said, quote, "This isn't happening." He was referring to the divorce. That's not going to happen. Kathie then told Robert that she was just done and she was going to move to Delaware. George, who was there witnessing this interaction, said that there was a lot of yelling and screaming and that Robert seemed really out of control and was out of his mind angry.
Oh, no. How fucking awkward.
10 days later, Kathie disappeared.
Oh, fuck. Yeah.
She was last seen alive January 31st, 1982, when she went to a dinner party without Robert at her friend Gilbert, I don't know his last name, in Connecticut. Kathie had shown up unexpectedly, and according to Gilbert, she wasn't acting like herself. She typically wore high-quality clothes. She showed up in red sweatpants and seemed visibly upset when she got there. During the party, Robert called that house multiple times, wanting to speak to Kathie, and people could hear him screaming through the phone for her to come home.
God, what a psycho.
No. I mean, she didn't want to. She eventually left the party to return to the house in New York. In an interview, Gilbert talked about the last conversation with Kathie. She said it was a very powerful conversation. Quote, "As she was leaving my house, she turned to me and said, 'Gilberte, promise me if something happens to me, you'll check it out. I'm afraid of what Bobby might do.'" End quote. I guess Robert went by Bobby. That's the last time anyone saw Kathie, aside from Robert. According to Robert, he and Kathie argued that night. He said Kathie wanted to go to their apartment in the city instead of staying at the house, because they were actually at a house they had in South Salem hamlet of Westchester County, New York.
Okay.
And she wanted to go to the apartment in New York City. So he dropped her off at the train station so she could catch the 9:15 train to Manhattan.
Sure.
Yep. Afterward, he told the New York City Police Department that he went for a walk.
Yeah,
I don't have an alibi.
After screaming my fucking head off at her when she's at a party.
He had a drink at a neighbor's house, spoke with Kathie on a payphone.
Sure.
When she returned to Manhattan apartment, and then he went to bed at the other house.
So she called him on a payphone, or he called her on a payphone?
He must have called her when he thought she returned.
Sure.
The neighbors Robert had allegedly seen that night, that was Bill and Ruth Mayer, later testified that Robert, this is going to be a surprise, lied to police, and he actually never visited them that night, the night she disappeared.
Surprise!
Moreover, Ruth also testified that Kathie had told her in private that Robert was abusing her.
Oh.
And Ruth encouraged her to report it, but Kathie said she just was too afraid. Before her disappearance, Kathie had made plans to meet Gilberte at a pub in Manhattan. I don't know exactly what day it was, but Kathie never showed. Gilberte was worried, and that's when the police got called several times over the next few days after Gilberte didn't hear from her or see her. On February 4th, Kathie's college, someone from the college administration, called Robert and said that Kathie had called in sick on February 1st and had missed a full week of classes. So on February 5th, basically they're like, we're really concerned.
Yeah.
Robert reported his wife missing. Detectives wondered why Robert had waited so long to report his wife missing, and he was very calm when he explained that they just spent lots of days apart. She was always working and studying and at the hospital.
And he was too busy with his girlfriend.
And yeah, he had
Dear Prudence.
Yeah. Police described Robert as completely calm and unmoved, as if he was unfazed that his wife had been missing for several days. Something else that was weird was when he reached out to the press soon afterwards, and he offered a $1,000 reward for information leading to her safe return. However, he then reduced the amount, stating that the original article had made a mistake.
What a cheap fucker.
Like, what, right? Wait.
Oh,
that
wait.
Was wrong amount. Like,
It's
what the fuck is that?
It's only 500.
Yeah, forget that 100,000.
Yeah.
It's obvious his wife didn't mean much to him.
No.
If he was willing to reduce the reward.
Yeah, right?
And he never reached out to her family.
Oh, man.
Instead, Kathie's family, who had no idea she was missing, found out about her disappearance in the newspaper.
That's terrible.
Due to his high-profile status, Kathie's disappearance and Robert himself gained a lot of media attention.
Yeah.
Luckily for him, his longtime friend, Susan Berman, stepped in as basically an unofficial spokeswoman and made statements and answered questions on his behalf because he's cuckoo.
Yeah.
He would have said something stupid.
Yeah,
like,
sure,
you know what?
that
That reward's reduced even more.
Oh, yeah, he says stupid shit. Yeah.
Yeah, after the article. It was a mistake, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it gets better. It gets better.
You know the story better than I even do. 3 weeks after Robert reported Kathie missing, he was already trying to basically erase her. In their Manhattan apartment, he threw out almost all her belongings into the garbage chute.
Because that's not suspicious.
And it led to the building's incinerator. And the building manager had to ask him to stop because he was clogging it up.
Oh my God, he was throwing so much stuff away?
He threw out her clothes, medical school books,
Wow.
jewelry, pretty much everything that belonged to her.
Oh yeah. She's not with us anymore, for sure. And he knows it.
Exactly. Kathie's friends, they ended up taking her disappearance into their own hands. And they broke into Kathie and Robert's South Salem home in the hopes they might find maybe her or find clues to her whereabouts. When they arrived, they found that the house had been turned upside down. Kathie's mail had been ripped open. Her belongings were stuffed into garbage bags. And interestingly enough, they found an itinerary of everything Robert had done on the night of Kathie's disappearance.
Shut up, he wrote it down?
Yeah, as well as the days prior. When they turned it in to the police, They said this isn't normal behavior for an innocent man, but rather for someone that was guilty of something who wanted to keep track of his lies.
Oh, yeah.
Shady. While the New York police explored leads and questioned Robert, it didn't go unnoticed that higher-ups were not really pushing to solve this case. The investigation had only been going on for a few weeks when it already began winding down, which this is a whole high-profile case. And you would think somebody from the Durst family being missing would continue to be a priority. But it seemed like the Durst family didn't really care about it, and the police didn't either. The Durst family wasn't cooperating with the police either, by the way. Robert refused interviews, polygraph tests, and even answering the most basic questions. But he did give several interviews to reporters.
Yeah. But don't talk to the police.
No,
go to the press.
No. He claimed that Kathie just ran off with another man.
Took nothing with her.
No, nothing.
Not $1.
And yeah, he's so pissed.
Suffered through medical school, didn't decide to finish it.
Yeah, didn't finish it. Just left.
Yep.
Since there was really no evidence about Kathie's disappearance, there wasn't any leads. The police actually did speak to some psychics.
Oh, okay.
And they did have suspicions that Robert might be involved. I mean, he lawyered up right away, which is what you do.
Yes, you should do that
That's
anyway.
what you do.
Who gives a shit if it makes you look guilty?
No, protect yourself. Got the best criminal attorneys in New York. But eventually, this case went cold. Slowly, Kathie's disappearance turned into nothing more than a cold case file. After a period of mourning, Robert returned to work in the family business the following year. Lazy ass.
I know.
This time in New York City, he took a big step from the social scene he once dominated. He ended up only keeping a very close circle of friends, including Susan Berman. In the next 10 years to follow, or roughly around that amount of time, he tried to reinvent himself, and he got a new girlfriend. Her name was Deborah Lee Sheraton. She was an ambitious New York City real estate broker. He sold that South Salem home that he and Kathie shared, and unbeknownst to Kathie's family, he filed for divorce from his still missing wife, claiming spousal abandonment.
Wow.
But before I tell you more about this story and the murders to come, we're going to take a quick break. Robert allegedly started behaving oddly at work.
No.
Okay. This includes urinating in trash cans.
What?
That's fucking odd.
That's
if
fucking
you and I are in this office and you piss in a trash can, I'm going to be upset. I'm going to be concerned about you.
Come on now. Really?
He was next in line to take over the family's company.
I mean, I've had to go bad.
I know, but I've never seen you do that yet.
No.
Not yet.
And I never will.
Okay, good. Robert was supposed to be next in line to take over his family's company, but his father ended up appointing his younger brother Douglas in that position in 1994. Robert accused his brother of stealing the company from him, which caused a big rift between Robert and the rest of his family. He would then spend the next decade traveling as a vagabond.
He's like, fuck it.
Fuck it. I'm sure he still had access to money. In 1999, after the New York Police Department received a bogus tip about the location of Kathie's body, police in Westchester reopened Kathie Durst's case. This time, they were looking at it as a homicide. Police searched the Durst home in South Salem. It was nearby a lake, but, they didn't find anything.
It's like 20 years later or something.
In 2000, the investigation became public. People knew about it. A month later, Robert married Deborah, his longtime girlfriend. It was kind of a quick ceremony, officiated by a single rabbi, picked out of the phone book. It's reported that they never lived together over the course of their marriage, and that they went years without speaking, which might sound weird. Why get married to begin with?
Right.
According to Robert, Susan Berman called him in December of 2000 to tell him the police wanted to interview her about Kathie's disappearance. At that time, Susan was living alone at her home in Benedict Canyon, Los Angeles, and she was working as a journalist and an author. A so-called mafia princess Susan wrote about her family's ties to gangsters, specifically her father, Davy Berman. I guess he was some Las Vegas mob boss.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a little background on Susan and Robert. They became friends after meeting as students at UCLA. They bonded over their trauma. When Susan was 12, her father died on the operating table.
Oh, damn.
And her mother died of a drug overdose a year later.
Oh, that's terrible.
Robert talked about how he believed his mom committed suicide. And Susan would call Robert her little brother, the little brother she never had. She was really protective of him. When she got married in 1984, it was Robert who walked her down the aisle.
Oh, that's cute.
No, it's not fucking cute, okay? The two had been nearly inseparable for decades when Kathie disappeared. However, she and Robert ended up drifting apart after Kathie's disappearance. Susan ended up leaving New York and settled in California, where she wrote 2 books, and I told you, about her life as a mob boss's daughter. She acted like she had a really glamorous life and led people to believe that, but that really wasn't accurate. In August of 2000, Susan was really short on money and facing eviction. In a desperate attempt, that's when she reached out to Robert asking for money. She didn't know how to get a hold of him, so she left a voicemail on a phone he kept in New York. Without even speaking together, he gifted her $50,000, and she used that to pay her debts and get herself back on track.
Wow, that was nice.
I know. I would have called him a long time ago.
Yeah, no shit.
Hey, Robert.
Hey, buddy.
Just checking in. This obviously helped Susan a lot.
Yeah.
The two eventually talked on the phone, and her life started getting better. She got hired to do a couple new projects, and now Robert was back in her life. Everything was good until she got contacted by the Westchester DA, who informed her Kathie's case was being reopened as a homicide, and they wanted to talk to her. After all, she'd never been interviewed in the initial investigation.
Wow, she'd never been interviewed.
Mm-mm. So the interview had been arranged to take place sometime early in the new year. And of course, this interaction between the DA and Susan made front page in the news because you've got the Durst family. On December 19th, Susan spoke with her friend. This was an actress named Kim Langford, telling her that she had the story of a lifetime and had information that was going to blow the top off of things.
Uh-oh.
Mm-hmm. Kim just assumed that this information was related to, I don't know, another mob story, something like that in Vegas. Susan also told Kim she had recently spoken to a psychic who told her that she was destined to die a violent death.
Oh my God. What a horrible thing to find out.
Wait,
What?
Excuse me?
Usually psychics only tell you good things.
Why would you tell me that?
I know. You're going to die a very violent death, Talia. What?
Oh, okay.
Well,
shit, I'm just going to go figure out a way to go peacefully if that's my future.
Damn.
And the psychic said it would involve a gun. On Christmas Eve in 2000, police were called to Susan's home after neighbors reported that her dogs were running loose on the street and barking wildly. Police arrived at Susan's home and they found the back door was a little bit open. In the doorway of one of her bedrooms was 55-year-old Susan. She'd been shot execution style with 1 bullet to the back of the head. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing was stolen. Police determined she'd been dead a day or 2 before the body was discovered. So maybe the dogs eventually just ran out.
Mm-hmm.
Some people speculated it was a mob hit in retaliation for all that information she was writing in books and talking to people on her upcoming project. But when police learned she was supposed to talk with the DA,
that seems suspicious.
That seems awfully suspicious. It didn't help matters that Robert flew out from New York City to San Francisco, California on December 19th, which is near where she lived, and then flew back to New York City from San Francisco on the 23rd, the day before Susan's body was found. After Susan's body was found, the LAPD received an anonymous letter postmarked December 23rd. The letter was addressed to the Beverly Hills Police with Beverly misspelled. Inside, the letter had Susan's address with 1 word, cadaver.
Damn.
What?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
What
is
this?
Crazy.
It was obviously a letter letting the police know there was a body there.
Yeah, what the fuck, right?
What is this? I didn't know this.
Yeah, this is crazy.
As it turns out, Susan did have some information to share about Kathie. According to her friend Linda Ops, Susan had told her that she was the one that called Kathie's college on February 1st and allegedly said she was sick. She pretended to be Kathie. According to the prosecuting attorney, Robert asked Susan to cover for him when Kathie had first disappeared by posing as Kathie and then calling in sick.
Oh.
They theorized that Robert had killed Susan after discovering, because it's in the paper, she's going to meet with the DA. And he was really afraid that she'd turn him in. A woman named Miriam Barnes, that's one of Susan's close friends, ended up testifying later that Susan called her and told her that she'd done a favor for Robert, but was nervous about sharing it. She told Miriam that if anything happened to her, Robert did it. Robert was questioned about her murder, but he was never charged. Robert didn't even end up attending the funeral.
And this is supposedly his close friend.
Oldest, dearest friend. In April of 2000, Robert escaped the city to avoid police inquiries, and he started renting a $300 a month apartment in Galveston, Texas, where no one knew where he was. This is like a billionaire's son, and he's in a $300 a month because he's trying to just escape.
You know they had to be a shithole, right?
Yes.
I mean, $300 a month?
Well, yes, okay.
I mean, had to be, right?
While living in Galveston, he pretended to be a mute woman named Dorothy Signer, a name he took from a high school friend. Like, seriously?
Yeah, okay.
Seriously,
what?
A mute
woman?
What is this shit?
Yeah. I can't with people sometimes.
He was spotted wearing women's wigs around town, visiting the library to look up articles on himself.
God, what a narcissist.
He posed as a mute woman because he had a really distinctive voice, and he thought that it would be very easily identifiable by someone. So he's just mute.
He's just not going to say anything.
That'd be hard.
It would be hard.
On September 30th, 2001, a man fishing with his son in Galveston Bay discovered a human torso floating in the water. They called the police and searched the area, and they found some garbage bags. Each bag had a total of 12 dismembered body parts. In the bags, they also found an outer packaging for a bow saw, a receipt for garbage bags, cloths, and a newspaper that contained a handwritten note with an address, 2213 Avenue K. Gross.
Yeah.
At the address, officers searched the garbage cans around the area, and they found more black garbage bags similar to the ones that they recovered inside some dumpsters. And they found an empty trash bag box, a 4-inch paring knife, and a .22 caliber shell casing, and an eviction notice addressed to someone named Morris Black. Morris was one of the tenants in the shared home on Avenue K. He'd been a veteran with a kind of a murky past. He was estranged from his family and his ex-wife. He lived a nomadic life, and he occasionally reached out to someone, but he was just pretty, what's the word I'm thinking of? He kept to himself. Ended up landing in Texas sometime in the mid-90s, and he was arrested in 98 for threatening to blow up a utility company.
Oh, well.
Because he was upset about his utility bill. His lifestyle made it really hard for them to track the timeline of him and what he'd done in the past. There was just decades without any documentation. Those in Galveston who had met Morris described him as a grumpy old man who was suspicious of everyone, paranoid, and prone to screaming outbursts. He used to live in New York City, but seemed to have gone off the grid in 82. It was discovered that this Morris guy had $130,000 in an out-of-state bank account, despite not having a job, at least on record, for decades. He'd been living off this money. And all his friends, and he didn't have many, had no idea he had any money. And now, he was missing.
Uh-oh.
He's gone.
He's gone.
He's gone. Police were able to execute a search warrant for Morris's home based on the fact the address was found
with the
torso.
The body.
Yes, with the torso. Once inside, they discovered blood everywhere. In the bathroom sink, the kitchen, in the drains. When they sprayed luminol throughout the apartment, it lit up like Christmas. Walls, floors, drag marks.
Oh, man.
That led from Morris's apartment to the apartment across the hall.
Oh, whoops, across the hall. And that's where...
Well, we don't know.
The mute woman lives.
Hey, how did you know? That belonged to Dorothy Steiner, a mute old woman whose neighbors didn't know very much about this woman, except she probably looked like an ugly man.
She looked like an old man.
She was rarely seen, had been known to travel frequently, always kept her shades drawn, and always kept to herself. Investigators got a court order to enter, and then they found blood everywhere there, too.
Oh, shit.
In Dorothy's kitchen, there had been several cuts in the linoleum floor, and when officers pulled the linoleum back, they discovered pools of dried blood underneath.
What a fucking mess.
What is this?
Yeah, like, it's
I got this
everywhere?
Morris guy. He's got $130,000, but, you know, is living in a probably $300 a month apartment. I got a mute woman and blood going between the apartments.
And it's everywhere.
Everywhere. It's so crazy. This apartment hadn't been cleaned as thoroughly as Morris's. There was dried blood splatter all over the place. There was a paring knife, a cleaver, a handsaw.
Oh, jeez. God.
A pistol. One of the bags they recovered from the water, it was empty, and it had this large rip in it. Officers concluded that that was the one that contained missing Morris's head.
Oh, man.
Because the body
was headless.
Was Morris's and headless. And that was the only part not recovered.
Oh, jeez.
And to them, that likely contained the key evidence in this case because they believed that Morris was probably shot in the head based on the rest of the body parts. They compared the fingerprints from Morris's time in the military to those of the body, and that's how they ended up identifying him. A medical examiner determined that the body parts recovered were from 71-year-old Morris Black. The medical examiner would later testify that the person who cut his body up knew what kind of instrument to use on what bone and what muscle and what part of the body. And it was a work of someone that had done this before.
Oh, shit. Oh, man. It's fucking disgusting.
Dorothy Steiner was now missing too. And police turned their attention to finding Dorothy. They had been able to determine that Morris was likely killed in his apartment, but then dismembered in Dorothy's. But why? Why? Why is this happening? It all started to make sense when they found a receipt in the building's trash. It was from a local optometrist, and it had Robert's name on it. Oh, now that's weird.
Yeah.
With that information, they thought, okay, perhaps this mute older woman, might be Robert Durst.
Yeah.
How strange.
Very weird.
Like, what the hell?
I would just be like, what the fuck?
Fuck is this
Yeah, what
shit?
the fuck is this?
Neighbors couldn't recall seeing Dorothy around the time that Morris disappeared, although they did recall seeing a man loading garbage bags into a Honda CR-V.
He left his wig at home.
It's like, what? They hadn't recognized him, but noted that he did make several trips in and out of Dorothy's apartment. Police took down a description of the vehicle, and they put a bolo out. They also looked in the national database to try to get any information they could about Miss Steiner. Thankfully, they found Miss Steiner alive and well.
They did.
But she said, I don't live in Galveston, Texas, and I'm not mute. When they asked if she knew Robert Durst, she replied that she did. They attended high school together back in the 50s, and she was very confused. I mean, she hadn't spoken to him in decades and had no idea why there was an apartment rented using her name and social security number.
Wow, he had her social
yes,
security.
Yes, he did.
Damn. Stole her
identity. What the hell is this? And by the way, there's a body in the apartment you've been renting, or there's blood in the apartment you've been renting. What?
Yeah, what? I know, I'd be like, somebody needs to sit me down and explain all this.
I'm very confused. 7 days later, a vehicle that was matching the description for the bolo was found, and they pulled over the driver. and they searched the car. Inside, they saw a bow saw and blood in the trunk of the vehicle. And that's when they arrested 58-year-old driver Robert Durst, October 9th, 2001, and they charged him with murder of Morris Black. He paid a $3,000 bail, and then he left Texas and went on the run. He failed to appear to his court date, and he was declared a fugitive. He ended up renting a car in Mobile, Alabama, under the name Morris Black. What?
This guy is too much.
Too much. Then in another really strange twist, he was found and arrested in a Wegmans grocery store in Bath, Pennsylvania. He was accused of shoplifting a $6 chicken sandwich.
Really, dude?
Some bandages and a newspaper, even though he had $38,000 in cash on him.
On him?
On him. What?
What the hell?
He had 2 loaded guns, a Medicaid card, and a driver's license belonging to Morris Black. But this time he shaved off all his hair and his eyebrows. Because that's not strange.
Because it's not going to be weird at all.
Mm-mm. I mean, at first they didn't really recognize him. It was only after he was arrested and they ran his social security number when he was arrested for the chicken sandwich that they realized who they had arrested. In January of 2002, he returned to Texas to stand trial for Morris Black's murder. According to Robert's testimony, he came home on September 28, 2001 to find Morris in his apartment angry because Morris had a key to his apartment. Robert hadn't been expecting him. He said he immediately suspected Morris of taking a gun that he'd stored in his oven.
That's a fantastic place for a gun.
What is this shit? When Robert asked him, "Where's my gun?" Morris reportedly stood and pointed it at Robert. Robert claimed that he grabbed the gun and the 2 men fell to the ground, and that's when the gun went off. He said he never even touched the trigger, and that's when Morris got shot in the head. So what do you do?
Yes,
I mean, what
right.
do
you dismember him and you throw him in the canal.
No, he tried to help his neighbor.
Okay.
By going to another neighbor's apartment, but no one answered. So he went back to his apartment. I mean, and then you kind of just like, what do? You gotta take matters into your own hands.
Guess.
So he grabbed a bottle of Jack Daniels and, dismembered Morris's body.
Because that's what I would do.
Before dumping it in the Galveston Bay.
Right? I mean, you wouldn't do that.
He tried. He knocked on the neighbor's door. No one answered.
No one answered. So he's like, well, fuck. What am I going to do?
I have to cut the body up.
I guess I'm going to have to dispose of it. I mean, it was an accident, but no one's going to believe me.
Well, he said because of, the suspicions of the past.
Yeah.
No one would believe him.
And the other bodies I cut up.
Private investigator ended up piecing together a connection between Robert and Morris that went way back. Because remember, Morris had all that money in his account, but had no job.
That's right.
Morris Black had a brother named Harry, and the 2 of them owned a construction business in New York back in the 80s. According to family members, it had been funded by the Durst organization, specifically Robert.
There you go.
Harry had passed in 2003, but his wife had said that when he learned that Morris had been murdered, he was really concerned he would be next. Yeah. You can see why, because you got this freak on the run, too. When asked why, his wife said, well, he had dark secrets.
I'm wondering, if he's got a construction company, I mean, what a better way to dispose of a body, right?
Right. And then, why did Morris have all that cash?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I don't know.
I'm not
saying anything.
I'm not accusing anybody of anything.
That he got bribed to do something with the body. But anyway, his wife told the private investigator that she believed the brothers knew something about Kathie's disappearance. Prosecutors believe that Robert murdered Morris when he found out his true identity, and he killed him out of fear that he'd be charged with Kathie's murder. They believe that Robert had specifically chosen Galveston, and he arrived concealing his identity as an old, mute woman in a low-income area next to the man that he used to fund work for him. It was intentional that he did this.
Yeah, it was intentional for Robert.
But why?
I know. It's so weird. Why would you get an apartment across the hall from someone you possibly, allegedly bribed?
Because he's nuts.
Yeah.
In his trial, because he did have a trial, Robert hired the best criminal defense attorneys the money could buy. It lasted 2 months, And despite a mountain of evidence, he was acquitted.
I love the American justice system sometimes.
Sometimes.
You know?
Sometimes it works, sometimes it
doesn't.
Needless to say, him being acquitted was pretty shocking. I don't know if I told you, after his original bail jumping, he was put on a $3 billion bail, but that was found to be unconstitutional.
It was a little excessive, I guess.
He did get found guilty of tampering with evidence and bail jumping, and he got 60 months for it. It's a felony. In October of 2004, just as he was about to be paroled, Pennsylvania authorities charged Robert with weapon possession stemming from his time when he was on the run. In July of 2005, he was released from federal prison and sent to Texas to serve parole. I don't really even know. I can't even keep track of all this shit. But Robert couldn't stay in one place. In December of 2005, he was arrested for a parole violation for making unauthorized trips to Galveston. He got caught after visiting a Texas mall where he happened to run into the judge who was presiding over the murder trial.
That's hilarious.
What are the odds of that? What are the odds?
I've never run into a judge in the wild, right?
Yeah, that's crazy. In February of 2006, he was released from prison, and his parole supervision ended 9 months later, and he was a free man. 4 years later, Robert's infamous deeds were made into a movie. It was called All Good Things. It was kind of loosely about his life. After the movie was released, he contacted the director, praising him about the movie.
Oh, God.
And they kept in contact for 2 years.
They did. They became friends.
Eventually, Robert agreed to be interviewed for an HBO documentary series about his life, even though his lawyer was like, don't do that. It was called
The Jinx,
which I didn't see. The Life and Deaths of Robert Durst.
It was good.
Like, why would
I
you
recommend it.
that?
Yeah, I recommend it for anybody who hasn't seen it.
He denied all responsibility for Susan and Kathie's deaths and disappearances, as you know. During the interview, the interviewer, I think the interviewer's name was Jarecki or something like that, asked to take a break.
Yeah, this is at the very end.
And he's just, mumbling underneath his breath?
Yeah, but he's still mic'd. The asshole's still mic'd. I think he goes to the bathroom.
You can barely hear him, but that didn't mean no one heard him because he had a hot mic.
Mm-hmm.
And his lawyer promptly walked up to him and told him, they just heard everything you said. And Robert starts to say something like what he said was harmless. And he said, did not tell the whole truth. Nobody tells the whole truth. In that same interview, Robert was asked the following. Do you have anything to do with the death of your wife? He said, I don't know that she's dead. Okay.
Yeah.
And then he was asked, do you think that it's possible she's alive now? And he said, it's possible, but not likely. With the help of Susan's stepson, Jarecki, was able to produce a letter written by Robert that had the exact same misspelling of Beverly, like the Beverly Hills letter from like the cadaver letter.
Yeah.
Not to mention the handwriting was uncannily similar to that tip. So Jarecki said, hey, do you want to have another interview, Robert? And he's like, yes, absolutely.
Of course I would, because I'm a narcissist.
So Jarecki brought out both the letters and confronted Robert with the similarities. Robert had a hard time himself. Started having some problems. He started burping uncontrollably as he
got all nervous.
Answers the question. Once it's evident that he had no excuse for the similarities in the letter, they took a break. During the break, Robert then goes to the bathroom. Mm-hmm. And he's got a hot mic once again.
Yes.
The fuck is
He's
this?
An idiot.
And he says the following. There it is. You're caught. You're right, of course. But you can't imagine. Arrest him. I don't know what's in the house. Oh, I want this. What a disaster. He was right. I was wrong. And the burping. I'm having difficulty with the question. What the hell did I do? Killed them all, of course. What the fuck is that, Tanya?
He killed them all, of course.
In the interview, he admits he's lied to the police about the night Kathie went missing. He said that he told the police he dropped her off the train station and, went to the neighbors. But, that wasn't true.
That was all bullshit.
It was all bullshit. The day before the final documentary episode aired, March 14th, 2015, Robert was arrested on a warrant charging him with the first-degree murder of Susan Berman. He was charged in Louisiana with felony weapon possession, and he was denied bail. because he's a flight risk. He accepted a plea deal on the charges and was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Then, in November of 2016, he got transferred to Los Angeles County Jail to await trial for the murder of Susan. During questioning, he tells the prosecutor he was high on meth when he was asked and agreed to the interview for the Jinx.
Really?
Mm-hmm. The next year, Kathie was declared legally dead at the request of her family. The trial for Susan's murder began on March 4th, 2020, but as we know, because of COVID, it got halted for 14 months. In May of 2021, the case resumed. On September 17th, it took the jury 3 days, and they found him guilty of the first-degree murder of Susan, as well as lying in wait and killing a witness. Less than a month later, the Los Angeles judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That same month, the Westchester County, New York DA's office announced that a grand jury would be impaneled to hear witness testimony and evidence in Kathie's disappearance. In late October, Robert tested positive for COVID. He was hospitalized. They didn't think he'd live through the indictment. So the state investigator, believing Robert may not live enough to be indicted, long enough to be indicted, filed a criminal complaint charging him with Kathie's death. On November 1st, 2021, Robert was indicted. He was by the Westchester County Grand Jury on second-degree murder charges of Kathie, and he was awaiting trial. That is until he went into cardiac arrest in California San Joaquin General Hospital and died on January 10th.
That's a shame.
2022.
Wow, this story is...
It's so crazy.
It is so crazy,
It is so
right?
crazy. That's why everybody tells it, because it's fucking nuts.
It's nuts. He was nuts.
Clearly.
Well, thanks, Talia.
Thanks, Tanya, and thanks, Tara, for helping us with this one. And if you'd like to take over, Tanya, go ahead.
If you would like to see more and see our sources, you can go to our website, crimesandconsequences.com. You can find out information there about becoming a Patreon member. And becoming a Patreon member, you get our weekly episodes ad-free and early release. You can go to patreon.com/TNTcrimes also to sign up. And if you listen to us on your Apple Podcast app, you can sign up there as well. They're the same episodes. And what you get by becoming a Patreon member or an Apple subscriber is you get another weekly episode besides the ones we release. And the weekly one, like I said, ad-free and early release.
Yep.
You can find us on social media.
Yeah, sure.
At Hardcore True Crime on Instagram and Facebook. And I think that's it. All right. Until our next episode.
Don't kill each other and don't.
Please don't do this weird shit.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye.